Me, 24. Working as a barista, which is fine for now. I'm a feminist, a pretty vocal one online, and I try to be in my real life too. I believe in equality, dismantling patriarchal structures, and calling out toxic behavior when I see it. One of the things that really gets on my nerves is the whole concept of the friendzone. It's a term invented by men who feel entitled to a woman's affection just because they were nice to her. Like, you can't just be friends? It's pathetic. A woman doesn't owe you anything for basic human decency. I had what I thought was the perfect example of a healthy male-female friendship with Silas. He was my best guy friend. We'd known each other for years, since we were in the same general social circle. He was just dependable, like a comfortable old sweater. Sweet, a great listener, always willing to help out. The kind of guy you could call at any hour for anything. And I did. My car broke down a few months back on a rainy Tuesday. First call was to Silas. He left his work early to come pick me up and wait with me for the tow truck. Didn't even complain. When I moved into my new apartment last year, he was the one who spent his entire Saturday helping me move heavy boxes and assemble my IKEA furniture. I bought him a pizza, and he seemed genuinely happy with that. That's what real friends do. The main topic of our conversations was usually my dating life, or lack thereof. There was this guy, Cale. He was in our extended group of acquaintances. Cale was the complete opposite of Silas. He was tall, mysterious, had that kind of detached confidence that just drives you crazy. He was a challenge. He barely seemed to notice I existed, which of course made me want his attention even more. I would spend hours dissecting my minimal interactions with him to Silas. Did the way he said hey sound interested? Did he hold eye contact for a second longer than necessary? Silas would listen patiently, on the phone, over coffee, in his car while he drove me somewhere. He'd always offer the same supportive advice, things like telling me Kyle was intimidating and I just needed to be myself. Honestly, his validation was the fuel that kept me going. A few months ago, there was a big party at a mutual friend's place. I knew Kyle would be there. I spent hours getting ready. I wanted to look effortlessly stunning. I showed up and immediately started scanning the crowd for him. Found him leaning against a wall talking to some girl. He was laughing at something she said. That deep, genuine laugh he so rarely used. It felt like a punch to the gut. I tried to catch his eye all night, walked past his group a few times. At one point, I was standing close enough to say hi. I mustered up all my courage. I walked over and said something like, "Hey, Cale, crazy party, right?" He glanced at me for a split second, a flicker of non-recognition in his eyes. He just gave a slight nod and turned right back to his conversation. He completely and utterly blanked me, in front of everyone. I felt my face get hot. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. I made my excuses and left the party early, trying not to cry on the way out. The second I got inside my apartment, the tears started flowing. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking with a mix of humiliation and anger, scrolled to Silas's name. It was almost 2 a.m., but I knew he'd pick up. He always did. The phone rang twice. His sleepy voice came on the line, instantly concerned. I just started sobbing and told him everything. How Cale had ignored me, how the other girl was all over him, how I felt so stupid and worthless. I vented for what must have been an hour. Ranted about emotionally unavailable men and their toxic games. Silas just listened. He made all the right noises. He told me Cale was an idiot who didn't know what he was missing. He said I was amazing and any guy would be lucky to have me. The usual script. It was exactly what I needed to hear. I finally calmed down, thanked him for being such an amazing friend, and hung up. I felt so much better. That's what friends are for. The next morning, feeling vindicated, I went on social media. I wrote a post about how grateful I am for male friends who understand boundaries. I added something about how the friendzone is a toxic concept, and that men who complain about it are the real problem. It got a few likes. I felt like I was doing my part to educate people. Life went on. I continued my pursuit of Kyle and continued my late-night therapy sessions with Silas. Then things started to get weird. It started subtly. I had a terrible day at work. My manager was being a jerk, and a customer was rude. I texted Silas a long paragraph detailing the whole ordeal, ending with, "Need to vent? You free to call?" Normally, he'd reply within minutes. This time, hours went by. Finally, a reply came through around 9 p.m. "Hey, sorry, just saw this. Was at the gym. Hope your evening got better." The gym? Since when was Silas a gym person? And no offer to call. Just a generic, polite sign-off. I felt a prickle of annoyance. It was just off. A week or so later, I had a dentist appointment across town. I hate taking the bus, and I knew Silas's work was near the clinic. I texted him the day before, asking if he could give me a ride home afterward. A simple favor he'd done a dozen times before. His reply was faster this time, but the answer was no. He said he couldn't. He had a thing after work. No explanation of what the thing was, just that he was unavailable. I had to take the bus. I was annoyed the whole way home. It felt unsupportive. We were friends. Friends help each other out. The little oddities kept piling up. He stopped being the first person to view my online stories. I'd call him, and it would go to voicemail more often than not. When he did call back, it would be hours later, and he'd sound distracted. Our conversations became shorter. He'd listen, but he wouldn't engage in the same way. The deep dives into Kyle's psyche were cut short, with him saying he had to go, that he was in the middle of something. The final straw for me was when I tried to make plans with him. I wanted to go see a movie, one of those indie films I knew Kyle would think was cool if I mentioned it. I figured Silas could be my movie buddy, like always. I texted him about it on a Monday, asking if he was free on Friday night. He didn't reply until Tuesday evening. "Hey, can't do Friday. Got plans." Again, just plans. Vague, secretive. I was starting to get genuinely worried and a little angry. What was going on with him? Was he mad at me for some reason? This wasn't the Silas I knew. The real Silas would have moved his schedule around. I decided I needed to talk to him face to face to clear the air. I texted him and asked if we could meet for coffee, framing it as me being concerned about him. He agreed, suggesting a place near his work for the next day. I showed up at the coffee shop, rehearsing my "I'm worried about you" speech. He was already there, sitting at a small table. The first thing I noticed was that he looked different. His posture was better. He wasn't slouching. His shirt seemed to fit him better across the shoulders and arms. He looked bigger, healthier. It was disconcerting. He smiled when I sat down, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. It was polite, but distant. I started by asking how he was, saying he seemed really busy lately. He just nodded and said yeah, he'd been focusing on some new things. He told me he'd been going to the gym consistently. He also mentioned he'd picked up his old guitar again and was practicing a lot. It was all very surface level, all about him. I tried to steer the conversation back to our friendship. I told him I felt like he was pulling away, and I asked if I'd done something to upset him. He just shook his head. He said it wasn't about me at all. He explained that he'd realized he wasn't spending enough time on his own goals and was trying to fix that. It sounded like some self-help nonsense he'd read online. I felt a wave of frustration. This was so selfish. To prove my point, I brought up a new Kale-related drama. I told him I'd heard Kale might be single again, and I was trying to figure out how to approach him. I waited for the usual Silas reaction, the intense listening, the thoughtful questions, the supportive encouragement. Instead, he listened for about 3 minutes, glancing at his phone. Then he looked at his watch. He told me he had to get going, that he had an appointment. He stood up, paid for his own coffee, and said it was good seeing me. Then he just left. I was left sitting there, completely stunned. He had never, ever been the one to end our conversations. I was always the one who decided when the venting session was over. I sat in that coffee shop for another 20 minutes, just replaying the interaction in my head. It wasn't just that he was busy. It was the way he looked at me. It was different. There used to be this warmth, this eagerness in his eyes. Now it was just neutral, polite disinterest. The comfortable old sweater was gone. In its place was something I didn't recognize, and I realized something else that truly bothered me. Throughout our entire 20-minute conversation, he hadn't asked me a single question about myself. The entire dynamic had shifted, and I had no idea why. I walked home feeling a strange mix of anger and panic. This wasn't right. Friends are supposed to be there for each other. He was being a bad friend. Maybe he'd fallen into one of those toxic online communities that preach about self-improvement at the expense of others. That had to be it. He was being influenced by some kind of toxic male ideology. My sweet, dependable friend was being corrupted. I decided I wasn't going to let this go. Our friendship was too important. I needed to fix him. I needed to make him see that he was being selfish and distant. I had to get the old Silas back. A couple of weeks went by. My attempts to communicate were met with the same polite but firm boundaries. He was always busy. He had plans. He was in the middle of something. The excuses were maddeningly consistent. I started to feel desperate. I was so used to having him as a sounding board that my own thoughts felt chaotic and loud without him to absorb them. Kyle had posted a picture of himself hiking with a group of people, and the girl from the party was in it. My mind was racing, and my first instinct, the one I'd had for years, was to call Silas and break it all down. I actually picked up my phone to do it, then stopped. I knew what his response would be. A short, unhelpful text message hours later. The feeling of being cut off was infuriating. It was a genuine loss. It felt like a betrayal. I had always been there for him, listening to his minor work problems or whatever. Okay, maybe he didn't have as many problems as I did, but the principle was the same. Friendship is a two-way street, and he had just closed his lane without any warning. I decided on a new tactic. If I couldn't get through to him with words, I'd create a situation where he would have to help me. An emergency. Something he couldn't just brush off with a text message. I saw a listing for a vintage dresser online. It was perfect for my bedroom. The seller lived on the other side of town and couldn't deliver. It was heavy. Too heavy for me to move alone. And it wouldn't fit in my tiny car. Silas had a big hatchback. He was the perfect man for the job. This was it. A classic Silas mission. There was no way he could refuse to help a friend in need with something so practical. This would be the thing that broke through his weird new shell and reminded him of his obligations as a friend. I called him. No text, a direct call. It rang. Once, twice, 3 times, voicemail. Hey Silas, it's me. I have a huge favor to ask. It's kind of an emergency. Call me back ASAP. I made sure my voice sounded stressed and urgent. Then I waited. An hour passed, then 2. My confidence started to waver. Finally, my phone buzzed. It was a text from him. Hey, got your message. What's the emergency? Everything okay? I typed back immediately, explaining the dresser situation. I laid it on thick, talking about how it was a once-in-a-lifetime deal and I would lose it if I didn't pick it up tonight. I ended with, "You're the only person I can count on for this. When can you come?" I watched the 3 little dots appear and disappear. He was typing. The reply that came back made my stomach drop. Oh man, that's a tough spot. Sorry, but I absolutely can't tonight. I have plans I can't break. I stared at the message in disbelief. He was really choosing his vague, mysterious plans over my actual tangible problem. I felt a surge of pure rage. I typed back, "What could possibly be more important than helping your best friend?" His reply was instant. "It's just not possible. You could try renting a truck from a hardware store, or maybe a TaskRabbit. Hope you figure it out." He was offering solutions. Practical, impersonal solutions. He wasn't offering himself. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't a phase. This wasn't him being temporarily weird. This was a permanent change. The old Silas was gone, and he wasn't coming back. I felt a genuine sense of panic rise in my chest. He was my safety net, my rock, and he had just calmly, politely, completely cut the rope. I didn't get the dresser. I just sat on my couch, phone in my hand, feeling more alone than I had in a very long time. The world felt a little less stable, a little less safe, and it was all his fault. The next few weeks were a blur of resentment. I tried to fill the void Silas left. I complained to my female friends about Kyle, but it wasn't the same. They'd offer advice like, "Just forget him," or "You deserve better." They didn't understand the nuance. They didn't have the patience to listen for hours while I analyzed every little detail. They didn't enable my obsession the way Silas had. They were trying to solve the problem. I just wanted to wallow in it with a supportive audience. I saw Silas's presence online, but it was like looking at a stranger's profile. He posted a picture of himself with his guitar, a genuine smile on his face. No angsty, thoughtful captions, just a simple statement about loving practice. Another time, he was tagged in a photo from a hiking trip. He was standing on a mountaintop, looking fit and happy. He was building a life, a real one, that didn't involve being on standby for my emotional emergencies. It felt like a personal insult. My own social life started to feel empty. My pursuit of Kyle, which had once felt like a thrilling, romantic challenge, now just seemed pathetic and exhausting. Without Silas to debrief with, the rejections felt sharper, the humiliations more acute. The fun was in the telling, in the drama of it all. Without an audience, it was just sad. One Friday night, a few months after our last real conversation, I was at a bar with a couple of girlfriends. We were there for our friend's birthday. I was in a terrible mood. Kyle had been invited, but he'd bailed at the last minute. I was sipping a drink, scrolling through my phone, and barely participating in the conversation. My friends were trying to cheer me up, but I was deep in my own self-pity. The bar was crowded and noisy. I was only half paying attention to my surroundings. Then my friend nudged me. "Hey, isn't that your friend Silas?" I looked up, annoyed. The last person I wanted to see was him. My eyes followed her pointed finger toward the entrance, and there he was. But it wasn't the Silas I knew, not at all. He was wearing a dark button-down shirt that actually fit him. His hair was styled differently. He carried himself with an easy confidence I'd never seen before. He wasn't hunched over or looking at the floor. He was scanning the bar, and he was smiling. And he wasn't alone. He was holding the door open for a girl who was with him. She was beautiful, not in a flashy, attention-seeking way. She had a natural, radiant look. She laughed at something he said, and the way she looked at him. It was pure admiration. It was a look I had craved from Kyle for years. A look I had never once given Silas. They walked past our table. Our eyes met for a brief second. He gave me a small, polite nod, the same one Cale had given me at that party. It was a nod of distant recognition. "I know you, but you are not part of my world right now." And then he was past me, leading his date to a spot at the bar. I watched them, completely frozen. My friends were chattering away. "Wow, he looks good. Who's the girl?" I couldn't speak. I watched as he ordered their drinks. He leaned in to hear her over the music, his hand resting gently on the small of her back. It was a gesture so natural, so possessive, and yet so gentle. I had never seen him touch a woman like that. I had only ever seen him carrying my heavy bags or fixing my broken shelf. She was telling him a story, her hands moving excitedly. He was completely focused on her, laughing at all the right parts. It was like watching a movie in which my dependable side character had suddenly become the leading man in his own romantic comedy. And I wasn't even an extra. It hit me then. A cold, hard realization that washed away all my anger and replaced it with a hollow kind of dread. The Friendzone wasn't a myth I was bravely debunking. It was a system, a resource. It was a comfortable, one-sided arrangement where I got all the benefits of a partner's emotional support, validation, and labor, without having to provide any of the intimacy or respect in return. Silas wasn't my friend. He was my emotional butler, and he had just quit without notice. He hadn't been corrupted by toxic masculinity. He had just developed self-respect. He had stopped setting himself on fire to keep me warm, and in the warmth of his own fire, he had found someone who wanted to share it with him, not just use it. I felt sick to my stomach. My friends were still talking, but their voices sounded distant. All I could see was him, happy and thriving, in a world that I had no part in. The girl he was with didn't look like she called him crying at 2 a.m. about some other guy. She looked like she valued him. The rest of the night was a wash. I went home early, making some excuse about a headache. The truth was, my entire reality had been shaken. I got home and sat in the dark. The anger was gone. The self-righteousness was gone. All that was left was a profound sense of loss. Not the loss of a friend, but the loss of a utility. The loss of an unpaid, unappreciated emotional servant. My support system, the one I took for granted, and even mocked the concept of, had packed up and left. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over his name in my contacts. I wanted to text him, to scream at him, to ask him why, to beg him to come back. But what could I even say? How dare you find happiness and stop making my life easier? It sounded absurd even in my own head. I scrolled through my contacts list, a desperate feeling creeping in. There were other guys in there, guys I'd kept in a similar orbit, not as close as Silas, but still on the roster. Mark, the guy from my old job who was always a little too nice, always offering to help. I hadn't spoken to him in months, not since he'd tried to ask me out, and I'd given him the gentle, "I just value our friendship so much" speech. I typed out a message. "Hey Mark, long time no see. How have you been?" I sent it, my heart pounding with a weird mix of hope and shame. I waited. An hour went by. Nothing. He had seen the message. The little read receipt was there. He was just choosing not to answer. The rejection felt surprisingly painful. Okay, next. David. A guy from a book club I'd been in. Quiet, sweet. He'd once fixed a typo on my resume for me. I sent him a similar message. He just thought of you. What have you been up to? This time, a reply came back after about 2 hours. I opened it eagerly. Hey Laura, all good. Life's been pretty crazy. Me and my girlfriend just moved in together, so it's been all about that. His girlfriend, of course. I typed back, "Oh wow, congrats." My fingers felt like lead. His reply was quick. "Thanks. Hey, gotta run. She's calling me for dinner. Talk later." But I knew there would be no later. I put my phone down on the table. The screen was dark. The silence in my apartment was deafening. There was no one to call, no one to text, no one waiting on standby to absorb my feelings. The entire network of convenient male support I had built around myself had dissolved. It wasn't a coordinated conspiracy. They hadn't all talked to each other. They had just, one by one, decided to invest their time and energy into people who invested back. They had moved on, they had grown up, and I was left behind, stuck in the same loop of complaining about the same guy who didn't care about me. The shock was overwhelming. My feminism had taught me that I owed men nothing, but it never occurred to me that they, in turn, owed me nothing either. Not their time, not their emotional labor, not their free handyman services, not their friendship, especially when the friendship was just a one-way street leading to a dead end for them. I thought about Cale, the guy I'd wasted so much energy on. He offered nothing, no support, no kindness, no time, and that's what made him a prize in my eyes. I thought about Silas. He had offered everything, support, kindness, and all of his time, and I had treated him like he was disposable. The irony was so thick I could choke on it. I had become the very thing I claimed to despise, an entitled person using someone for their own benefit, with no regard for their feelings. I was the user. I was the toxic one. I stared at my reflection in the dark screen of my phone. I didn't like the person looking back at me. I was completely, utterly alone. And for the first time, I knew with absolute certainty that I had no one to blame but myself. The friendzone wasn't a myth. It was real. I just never realized I was the one who had created it, and now I was its only resident.